At only 17 years of age, Derek finds himself the unwitting link between his sleepy Nebraska farm town and a dangerous and shadowed ancient evil, spoken of only in secluded whispers. While spending time with his best friend Andy, an unexplainable storm rolls into town, bringing along with it a mysterious time warp window that leads to whereabouts uncertain. Through a heroic act of bravery, Andy falls victim to the abnormality. Derek, with no choice but to follow his heart, abandons all reason and leaps headlong into the strange and mystifying window which takes him to a place he can't see to save Andy from an unknown fate. Unbeknownst to Derek, what awaits him is an unimaginable adventure wrought with deception, betrayal, faith, love, heartbreak, and the discovery of a secret he doesn't even know he is keeping. As events on both sides of the time travel spectrum become intertwined, Derek and Andy begin to realize their predicament may be more than what they bargained for. Travel through time with Derek and Andy and unlock the mystery of The Dark Behind the Door. Written by Brian Obernoll. Chapter 1. Bracing for impact, he held his breath. The blow came slightly sooner than expected. He clenched his teeth and let out an exhausted grunt as he lost his footing and fell to his knees. He pushed himself up with a closed fist against the ground, while the other hand pressed hard alongside his chest. He squeezed his eyes closed, trying to burn off the sting from the sweat pouring from his brow. Wearied and spent, he turned his head to look left, then right, for a place to run as he dared to take a moment to catch his breath. The open field had nothing to lend. With his legs failing after several hours of evasion, he lunged forward, staggering to his right a few steps, and then, once again, fell. Recognizing his entire body, pounding and parched, was done. He finally relinquished the hope of escape and found himself at an unfamiliar place, the end of himself. This day would be his last. As fading optimism wilted away, the realization of the inevitable mounted, and he broke. He wept but for a moment, deeply and sorrowfully. From the sky far above him, the great beast spread its wings and circled back around, hurling a ferocious roar from its distant height. It then pinned back its wings and dove down towards the open terrain. Composing himself, he crawled on his stomach several feet farther, returning to a shallow trench where a friend, a young lady, lay twisted, bleeding and unconscious. He opened his mouth to speak, but only managed breathy words. Why? What were you thinking? I'm so angry at you. I mean, you were safe. You shouldn't have come, he said. He paused for a moment and then let out a frustrated sigh. It was foolish. Besides, what is it you always say? What's going to happen is going to happen. If that's so true, why are you here? He looked over her face, nearly angelic if not for the blood and dirt smudges, then stroked her cheek. You're 1 in a million, you know that? I wish we could have known each other longer than these past few months, he added. He focused on her lips and then brushed them with his fingers. I wish things could have been different. I have to go now. Think about me, okay? Don't you ever forget me. He touched her hand, then held it lightly. I hope I make you smile when you think about me. An emerging frown betrayed the optimism in his voice. In that moment, he made a silent vow that if ever life afforded him another chance with her, he'd steal her heart. Whoever it is you're waiting for, he's one lucky guy. All right, well, I'm not going to say goodbye. So, until we meet again, and may God protect you always. He gathered what strength he could muster and stood. To keep more harm from coming to her, he limpingly created some distance between himself and the girl. He raised his red and swollen eyes, wearily ready to accept what he never could have imagined for himself. Thoughts of regret arose as he mulled over memories of his parents and sister. He'd successfully escaped the dragon's pursuit on no less than a dozen separate encounters over the last 2 months. How had he managed to come to such an end? Stranded in another place, another time, and now, what? He drew in a deep breath, realizing there simply was nowhere else to run, nothing else to say except perhaps a prayer. Was there a god somewhere in all of this? Once again, he reviewed his good moments to the best of his ability and wondered how they stacked up against the bad. He removed his wristwatch, a gift he'd been given for his 19th birthday, his latest, and held it tightly. He slid open his cell phone and then looked back over his shoulder. He figured he had less than a minute. He activated the voice recorder utility and scanned the 12th century landscape. He closed his eyes, purging welling tears. Wiping the sting from both of them, he panted out what he knew would be his final words. "Mum, it's Jake. I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry for everything I said the last time we spoke. I want you to know that I thought about what you said and you were right. I never should have let a girl come between any of us. None of what happened was your fault. I didn't run away, and I'm not dead." "Well," his voice trailed away. He stole a look over his shoulder and spotted the approaching shadow far off in the distance. He continued, "Please know that I love you. And Sissy, your big brother was never mad at you. You'll always be more important than any of my girlfriends. I've missed you more than anyone. The next time you see Dad, tell him." He paused for a moment, reflecting, and then added that he'd be proud of me. "I love you." He closed the phone and prayed, "Oh God, if you are there, please help them to see that nothing was their fault. God, I don't know how to do this. Please save me." As the words left his mouth, a mighty wind arose while trees began to rock. The beast stretched out its wings to decelerate for a final approach. Suddenly, with merely seconds remaining, out of nowhere a horse and rider materialized, and then sprinted toward Jake in a fateful race against the dragon. The rider, a grease-smothered young man sporting nothing but a loin wrap and shoulder bag, leaned to one side and held out a hand. "Jake! Jake!" the rider's familiar voice called. "Grab hold! We can make it!" Jake turned, only to see his spark of hope become dashed by the beast's quicker maneuver. Its open jaws swiftly closed in upon him and the rider. Jake drew in a courageous last breath, clenched his fists, and then averted his eyes. He felt the heat of the beast's breath as a sudden light flashed about him. With a single snap, in one great sweeping motion, it was over. Jake, the rider, and the horse were gone, and nothing but a shoulder bag descending out of the sky evidenced they were ever there. Chapter 2.